I see you have a big dick, so you made the executive decision to play a Gunlancer. I'm going to show you how to optimally build and play this class so that you can get MVP every single time. Your second decision is to choose between the red or blue builds. I played Low Knight during my T1 career and realized it was actual garbage. Yeah, you get some extra damage, but you end up cucking the one mechanic your class is built around. Without a shield, you'll be interrupted non-stop, making the gameplay feel like absolute shit. This is especially true throughout the T1 and 2 phases where we don't have spirit absorption to make up for our lack of speed. Go with combat readiness. Its damage is comparable, and once you've gotten some more engravings, you'll be pretty much unkillable. Trust me, standing in front of the boss and going blow for blow while your teammates are getting knocked the fuck around is a joy to experience. Let's talk about our abilities. I'll mention them in the same order that they're used in our damage rotation. Bash lets us swing our shield at an enemy, inflicting a small amount of damage and stunning them. It can also be used to counter, but its range is very short. There's a better option we'll talk about later. Because of the range, I sometimes like to use shield bash first to get me to melee distance. You can also do a backdash to close the gap in a similar way. Its tripod effect gives us armor destruction, lowering enemy defenses by 12% for 10 seconds, and ready attack, which gives us a 25% boost in damage for 5 seconds. You can see this ability is a huge steroid which we will use to pretty much start any damage rotation that we do. And we use Bell Strike here just to make it a bit easier to hit bosses who might be a bit more mobile. I use Shield Bash next because its movement is quite synergistic with Bash. It's a 2-part ability with a good amount of stagger damage. We don't go for the armor destruction tripod here because it doesn't stack with Bash, so instead we go for nimble movement, which increases the overall speed of our damage rotation. For the second tripod slot, you have the choice between shield enhancement or weak point detection. Go for weak point detection if you want more damage, but I like shield enhancement. It's a good way to generate more shields when abilities like Shout of Hatred are on cooldown. In on-level content, I would suggest going for shield enhancement, but if you're at the point where you're over leveled and damage isn't really a problem anymore, go for weak point detection. Overall, we're just using this ability for damage and to stack up a bit of shield meter if necessary. Guardian's Thunderbolt is our most damaging ability. It has a wide range and can electrocute enemies, stunning them for 3 seconds. We normally use this when we're right next to the enemy so that we can hit them with all parts of the attack. For the tripods, we go Damage Luck, Tough Strike, and Lightning Stalk because these all increase the raw amount of damage the ability does. For Chaos Lunges, in the second tripod slot, we use Wide Hit instead, just so we can hit all of the mobs that spawn. In the overall damage rotation, you have the choice between Thunderbolt or Shield Bash for your second ability. It doesn't really matter which one you go for, just use whichever one you think would be appropriate in that scenario. Maybe Guardian's Thunderbolt is on like a 2-second cooldown, so use Shield Bash first, then Guardian's Thunderbolt, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. For the next ability, you have the choice between Surge Cannon or Leap Attack. Surge Cannon has a bit more raw single target DPS and also has weak point level 1. Leap Attack has the advantages of being faster, gives additional movement options, and it fits very nicely into our skill rotation. If you use Surge Cannon, you won't be able to get the damage buff from Bash on Shield Charge because it takes a long time to charge up the ability. Choose whichever one you prefer to play with. I like Leap Attack because Surge Cannon slows down our rotation too much. Bear in mind, for Leap Attack, you want to jump directly onto the enemy to get usage out of the first tripod slot, direct hit. And the next tripods are Electric Field and Low Shock for even more DPS. For Surge Cannon, you go High Explosive Shot, Overcharge, and Focus Fire. Shield Charge is a great all-rounder. It does decent damage, gives you paralysis immunity, and with tripods gives a small but very useful shield. You can use it as a movement ability to get out of danger zones or to close the distance between you and a boss. It's also nice for circling around the boss so that you can get opposite to your party, and I'll talk about why that's important when I'm discussing the general playstyle of a Gunlancer. We use Shield Charge at the end of the DPS rotation because in this game, when you pop a continuous skill, the buffs you have active apply to that ability even when they expire. It's hard to explain it verbally, so let me just show you what I mean. So I go through the entire damage rotation, and in that last, let's say, sub 1 second period, I'll use Shield Charge so that it gets the buff throughout its entire duration. For the other tripods, we use Enhanced Strike and Destruction Charger for even more DPS. Dash Upper Fire is our main counter ability. We'll pretty much always be right in front of every enemy we fight, so by default we're one of the best classes at countering bosses, especially because we have a shield as a safety net if we fuck up. Always strive to counter the boss as a Gunlancer. We don't do as much damage as DPSs like Surge Deathblades, so it's our responsibility to make up for that by being useful to our team in other ways. This is a better counter ability than Bash because it has more range and it pushes you forward 3 meters. Keep it off cooldown if a boss has counter mechanics, otherwise just use it on cooldown for more damage and more importantly, stagger damage. Now we're going to get to our 2 greatest skills which allow us to support our teammates. Shout of Hatred is currently the only taunt ability in the game. Taunting a boss allows you to cancel whatever attack they're doing and makes them turn to face you. Because of this, you want to position yourself opposite to where the rest of your party is so that they can get back attacks more easily. Do not taunt the boss to face your teammates. It's going to waste damage, force them to stop DPSing to reposition. You don't even have to use this ability as a taunt though. Its secondary function, which you gain from its third tripod effect, Open Weakness, gives you a shit ton of shield meter when you hit an enemy with it, and it buffs the damage of your entire party. Its second tripod effect also gives you a pretty big shield. So you can see this ability has multiple uses, but with good timing you can hit many birds with one stone. You can taunt the boss to face you, cancel their attack, give you shields, and give your party damage all in one go. You just have to put in the thought behind when the best moment to taunt would be, and this comes through experience. Just don't hold onto it for excessive periods trying to get the perfect hit. A lot of the time you'll just be popping it whenever your shields are running low anyway. Nidasia's energy is fucking amazing. Its base effect reduces damage taken by your entire party, but its third tripod effect gives them a shield equal to 12% of your max HP on top. You normally want to pop this skill when shit's hitting the fan, i.e. when there's a lot of shit flying across the screen. But if you know the boss's attacks a bit better, you can start reacting to their attack patterns and using it to mitigate their strongest abilities and area effects. In the first tripod slot, we use quick prep just like we do for Shout of Hatred. We want to spam these abilities as much as possible, so reducing cooldown is crucial. For the second tripod slot, most of the time we'll be running effectiveness because of the increased damage negation. But in certain fights like Egrexion or Argos Phase 3, you want to use Shout of Purification, it's a cleanse. Guardian's Protection is on paper the better awakening skill for this class, as it gives us a full bar of our shield and reduces the damage taken by our allies. Personally, I prefer Lancer Judgment for the larger burst and the 10% crit rate we can give our party for even more damage. I found this table on Reddit which highlights the best tripods for each of our abilities. I don't remember where I found it, so I unfortunately can't give credit to the creator, but this is pretty much what you're looking for. Prioritize level 3 upgrades for ready attack on Bash and other tripods in red. Lastly, here's the build for Chaos Dungeons. Using these abilities and tripods will let you clear each dungeon in around 5 minutes. Just focus on bringing enemies together by running around in circles, following with a taunt. Wait for the enemies to group up again and nuke them with either Thunderbolt or Surge Cannon. Fire Bullet is a good filler skill you use when everything else is on cooldown. I also go for Nidasia Energy here for extra survivability. This way we can kind of autopilot throughout dungeons without worrying about HP. In the last part of the dungeon, you can just spam Surge Cannon like a fucking Beyblade. I don't really know why its cooldown gets refreshed entirely, but it does, so just take advantage of that. Now we're going to go through our rune picks. We use Overwhelm on Dash Up a Fire because there's no other real good options for a rune on this slot. The extra stagger damage gives us more options as to how we can use this ability. We use Bleed on Shield Bash because like before, there's no real good options we can use in this slot. You could go for extra stagger damage or wealth to increase the shield meter you get from this ability. We use Rage on Bash because it's the first ability in our rotation, meaning if we proc Rage, the entire rotation becomes a bit faster. It's best to use this rune on abilities which are earlier in the damage rotation so that the rest of the abilities get the buff. We use Gale Wind on our major damaging abilities with the ultimate goal of fitting them all in our entire damage rotation. In an ideal scenario, you'll have Shield Charge getting the benefits from Bash before the buff runs out. Shout of Hatred and Nidasia are both our highest costing mana abilities. This means we have to use focus runes on both of them so that we don't end up with mana problems. When you start using Spirit Absorption level 3, you will notice that you run out of mana more frequently. This is because we're spamming our abilities much more often. And to offset that effect, we need focus runes. Without these, you will run out of mana, which will bottleneck your DPS. Here are the gems you want to use. For our stats, we want to prioritize specialization as this increases the damage of our blue abilities and makes generating shields easier. Only take crit on your necklace. You may already know this, but I just want to reiterate the idea that stats are more important than engravings. Don't ever sacrifice stats for a level 3 engraving, they're just not worth it. You see, from 1400 specialization, I get 144% extra shield recovery and 200% extra damage on my basic skills, which are your blue skills. Our class Engraving Combat Readiness increases the damage of our normal skills and the amount of shield we get in defensive stance. Also, when we get hit, we get a stacking 4% buff in damage, which can hit up to 12% at level 1. The overall increases from level 1 to 2 to 3 aren't that high. You see it's just a 1% increase. Overall, that would mean that at engraving level 3, for example, at max stats you have 18% extra damage versus the 12% at level 1. That increase in damage is pretty much negligible, which is why we don't go above combat readiness level 1. And this does mean that it is easier to get our other engravings. For the buff itself, you don't really want to focus on having the buff active before you start dealing damage. It's a small amount, but the idea is that whenever you're standing in front of a boss, you'll be in defense stance, which should mean that you easily hit 3 stacks without even noticing it. I don't normally keep track of this ability at all outside of Chaos Dungeons, because sometimes in Chaos Dungeons, enemies will survive with 1 HP, and that will be purely because I'm lacking stats in combat readiness. Barricade is our most important secondary engraving. If you play the build properly and you aren't getting hit too much, you will always have a shield up throughout an encounter, meaning you have a permanent 16% damage boost. There's not much to say about this, to be honest. This engraving just complements the fundamental mechanics of our class perfectly. Next, you want Spirit Absorption at least level 2. This is where we actually get enough speed to match other classes. It makes our skill rotations faster, makes dodging shit easier, and general gameplay smoother. We are so fucking slow without Spirit Absorption. You will actually be able to keep up with your teammates when you're running to Guardians and shit. It's a huge difference. Going to level 3 Spirit Absorption is kind of controversial. Some people don't think you need it. I do. It's just preference. Note that because you'll be spamming your skills, you will start to experience mana problems. Stabilized status gives us extra damage when above 80% HP. This is very similar to Barricade, where it will be up permanently throughout a fight. If your health is taking damage, it means you're playing too recklessly and getting hit too much, which is draining your shields. Sometimes it is worth it just to heal up a small amount of damage you've taken if you've lost the buff, because a 16% boost in damage is pretty high. You want to keep that up for as long as you can. For all classes, level 3 Grudge and Cursed Doll are endgame engravings. Do not use these unless you can get them to level 3 and you are confident in your skills. They are worthless otherwise, because remember, a dead DPS is no DPS. You can see that I have a 3-3-3-1 setup going on. My next engraving will be Grudge. Hitmaster is also a decent alternative. You'll get 4% less damage than you would with Grudge, so if you wanted to min-max everything, then Grudge would be the better option. Being in defense stance reduces our movement speed a lot and drains it at the same time, so turn it off when you aren't getting hit by the enemy. Also note that you can't generate more shield with defense stance active, so before you taunt, turn it off first. For safety, you can use Gunlancer right before doing this to protect your health pool, and this will be a guaranteed way to keep stabilized status up. Defense stance makes us an immovable wall by giving us push immunity as well, but you can't play too recklessly in on-level content. Getting hit by consecutive attacks will rape your shield meter, leaving you defenseless. So at the minimum, you need to dodge an enemy's strongest attacks. You'll know which these attacks are. They'll be the ones that chunk down your shield meter. This idea only applies though if you don't have a full meter, because when you do, you can just tank anything, to be honest. Especially if your taunt is off cooldown, you are not going to die anytime soon. It's pretty much all situational. Another major role we can take in fights is during stagger checks. I'm not 100% sure, but I think this class has the most stagger damage out of all of them, which means that when a stagger check needs to be done, we want to be the ones doing damage first so that we can go through our entire rotation. This is an important concept in fights like the Phantom Legion King and Belshazzar. If you know a stagger check is about to come up, for example some of these bosses do these checks at certain health intervals, start to save abilities like Bash, Dash Up a Fire, Shield Bash and Charge to make the check a little easier. It's worth keeping them off cooldown if it means that mechanics go smoother. You will take a lot of stress off of your party by doing this. I see a lot of hate on our shitty little backstep, but it's honestly not a bad movement ability at all. Considering how tanky we are, we don't really need movement options like that in the first place. In shield stance, the backstep is the best option to move out of danger zones which are not too large. If they are, however, your other option is to shield charge out. Using these options means you can stay in shield mode and keep DPS on the boss at the same time. Because we're so tanky, we don't really need a full dash to begin with, but it does take getting used to. Turning on your shield right before an enemy hits you is optimal. Don't just stay in shield stance the entire fight, it's not efficient. We don't need to dodge as many attacks as other classes. If you really want to play the Gunlancer to its best ability, you'll need to start learning how to keep an eye on your teammates. This should already be second nature to you if you're a support main. Essentially, you want to time your shields to block as much damage as possible. If you use your shield and you don't see your teammates' bars getting chunked down, then you essentially wasted it, and this is your cue to figure out better timings. If you follow the general advice I laid out to you, you should start to see yourself getting MVP in most group content. I might make specific guides for fights like Argos, so leave a like and comment if that's something you want to see. If there's a decent amount of people who want something like that, then yeah, I'll do a video on it. If you want to see more content like this in the future, be sure to subscribe. Peace. I'm going to show you how to optimally build and play this class so that you can get MVP every single time.